Imagine you are sitting in a crowded room. Everyone can see that there is a massive, bright pink elephant standing in the corner. You know it's there. The person next to you knows it's there. In fact, every single person in that room knows it's there. But as long as no one says it out loud, as long as no one catches another person's eye and nods toward the elephant, you all can continue to pretend that the room is perfectly normal. But the moment one person shouts, "Hey, look at that elephant," the spell is broken. The situation hasn't changed, but the social reality has shifted forever. This is the difference between everyone knowing and everyone knowing that everyone knows. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today we're exploring a concept that sounds like a tongue twister, but actually rules almost every interaction in your life. From why you feel awkward on a first date, to why stock markets crash, to why revolutions suddenly explode out of nowhere after years of silence. We are diving into Steven Pinker's profound work, When Everyone Knows That Everyone Knows That Everyone Knows, Common Knowledge and the Science of Harmony, Hypocrisy, and Outrage. By the end of this episode, you're going to look at your social world through a completely different lens. We'll understand why polite hypocrisies are actually the glue holding society together, how cancel culture uses the mechanics of public awareness to create outrage, and why the most powerful thing you can do in a group is simply to point out the obvious. We're going to peel back the layers of the human mind to see the invisible threads of common knowledge that connect us and sometimes tear us apart. Let's start with a puzzle. Think about a bribe. If I want to bribe a government official, I don't usually walk in and say, "Here is $10,000 in exchange for a building permit." That's too risky. Instead, I might say, "You know, officer, I've always been a great admirer of your department's work, and I'd love to make a contribution to your favorite charity, if you could just help me clear up this little paperwork issue." Why do we do that? Both people know it's a bribe. The officer knows I'm paying for a favor. I know the officer knows. So why use the coded language? Steven Pinker argues that this isn't just about being polite. It's about avoiding common knowledge. As long as the bribe is veiled, there is a thin layer of plausible deniability. If I use a veil, I haven't officially challenged the social norm that bribery is wrong. We can both pretend we are honest people. But if I say it directly, it becomes common knowledge. Now we both know, and we both know that the other person knows. There is no going back. The relationship has been permanently redefined as a corrupt one. Pinker, as a cognitive scientist, is obsessed with this recursive thinking, the "I think that I think" loop. This is what separates human intelligence from almost everything else in the animal kingdom. It's the basis of what he calls the science of harmony and hypocrisy. Common knowledge is different from shared knowledge. Shared knowledge is just when a group of people happen to know a fact. Common knowledge is a specific state where everyone knows X, everyone knows that everyone knows X, and everyone knows that everyone knows that everyone knows X. It's like a hall of mirrors. Why does this matter? Because common knowledge is a coordination trigger. Think about a protest in a totalitarian regime. For years, everyone might hate the dictator. That's shared knowledge. But everyone stays home because they are afraid that if they go out into the street, they will be the only one there and will be arrested. They don't know if their neighbors are willing to revolt. Then something happens. Maybe a single person stands in front of a tank, or a specific video goes viral. Suddenly, it's not just that everyone hates the dictator, it's that everyone knows that everyone else hates the dictator too. The fear of being the only one vanishes. That is the moment the regime falls. It's a phase transition, like water turning into steam. Before we move into how this common knowledge explains the chaos of social media and the cancel culture we see in 2026, let's take a quick breather. If you're enjoying this breakdown of the hidden structures of our minds, please take a moment to follow us and leave a review. It's the best way to help other people join our common knowledge community and keep the show growing. Now, let's get into the hypocrisy part of Pinker's title. We often think of hypocrisy as a moral failure.
If you say one thing and do another, you're a hypocrite, right? But Pinker suggests that benign hypocrisy is actually a sophisticated tool for social harmony. Consider the white lie. When your friend asks if they like their terrible new haircut and you say, "It's really unique," you're not just being nice, you're actively working to prevent the common knowledge that the haircut is bad from entering the relationship. If you say, "It's ugly," then you both know it's ugly and you both know the other person knows. Now, every time you look at each other, that ugliness is a third party in the room. By staying in the realm of veiled truth, you protect the social bond. Pinker applies this to much larger scales like diplomacy and international relations. Why do countries use such vague, diplomatic language? Because directness creates common knowledge that can lead to war. If a diplomat says, "We know you are building a weapon," it's an ultimatum. If they say, "We have concerns about certain technological developments," it leaves room for both sides to save face and keep talking. It's the plausible deniability that keeps the peace. But there is a dark side to this. This same mechanism explains the outrage we see today. Have you ever wondered why a small mistake by a public figure can suddenly turn into a massive cancellation or a shaming mob? Pinker explains this through the lens of mutual awareness. In the past, if you did something embarrassing, maybe 10 people saw it. It was shared knowledge among a few. But on social media, when a post goes viral, it creates a public sphere. When you see a post with 1 million likes, you're not just seeing the content, you're seeing the fact that 1 million other people are also seeing it. You are aware of the collective I. This creates a massive pressure to conform. If everyone is outraged, then you feel you must be outraged too, or else you might become the next target of the common knowledge that you aren't one of us. This brings us to one of the most fascinating parts of the book, the first date problem. Why is dating so awkward? It's because it's a constant battle over common knowledge. Two people are sitting across from each other, trying to figure out, is this a romantic thing or just a friendly thing? If you make a move too early and it's rejected, it becomes common knowledge that you were rejected, which is awkward and face-threatening. So we use sexual innuendo, we use veiled comments, we test the waters, we look for signals. We're trying to reach a point where we both know the interest is mutual, but we want to do it without the risk of a blunt declaration that could fail. It's a dance of recursive thoughts. I think she likes me, and I think she knows I like her, but I'm not sure she knows that I know she knows. Pinker argues that our brains are essentially common knowledge machines. We're constantly scanning the environment to see what's public and what's private, and the line between those two things determines our level of freedom. In a world where privacy is disappearing, where our diaries are now digital and public, the common knowledge we're forced to participate in is becoming more rigid.
Let's move from the dinner table and the first date into something a bit more high stakes. The global economy and the boardrooms of the world's most powerful companies. Have you ever looked at a financial bubble, like the housing crisis, or even the wild swings in cryptocurrency, and thought, how did so many smart people not see this coming? The truth is, many of them did see it coming. They had the shared knowledge that the prices were unsustainable, but they didn't have common knowledge. This is what Steven Pinker calls the greater fool theory, wrapped in a psychological trap. If I know the market is a bubble, but I don't know that you know it's a bubble, I might keep buying because I assume there is still a greater fool out there who will buy it from me tomorrow. The bubble only pops when the reality becomes common knowledge, when a signal becomes so loud that everyone knows that everyone else knows the game is up. It's the crying wolf effect, but in reverse. Pinker links this to a fascinating concept called the Abilene Paradox. Imagine a family sitting on a porch in Texas on a boiling hot day. The father suggests, "Hey, why don't we drive to Abilene for dinner?" The mother thinks it's a terrible idea because the car has no air conditioning, but she says, "Sounds like a great idea," because she doesn't want to be a wet blanket.
The son thinks it's crazy, but he sees his parents agreeing, so he says, "I'm in." They drive 4 hours in the heat, eat a terrible meal, and come home exhausted. Only then does someone admit, "I didn't actually want to go," and everyone else says, "Me neither." They all had the shared knowledge that the trip was a bad idea, but they lacked the common knowledge of each other's true feelings. They were trapped by a false consensus. This happens in government cabinets, in tech companies, and in your own friend groups. We often do things that nobody wants to do simply because we think everybody else wants to do them. Now, let's pivot to something even more intense, the outrage machine and the science of the shaming mob. In 2026, we see this every day on social media. One person makes a controversial tweet, and within hours their life is dismantled by a cancel culture mob. Why does this happen so fast? Pinker argues that common knowledge turns a group of individuals into a superorganism. When a scandal breaks, it's not just that people are offended, it's that they are witnessing a public spectacle. When you see a post with 50,000 angry reactions, your brain receives a very specific signal. The tribe has decided this person is an enemy. In an evolutionary sense, if you don't join the mob, you might be seen as a sympathizer of the enemy. So people join the outrage not necessarily because they are personally offended, but because they need to publicly demonstrate that they know what the correct opinion is. It's a coordination game. The mob isn't just about punishing the individual, it's a ritual to reinforce the common knowledge of the group's values. This is why these mobs are often so disproportionate to the crime. The goal isn't justice, the goal is the synchronization of the crowd. This brings us to a very Pinkeresque question. If common knowledge can be so dangerous and lead to mobs and bubbles, why do we have it at all? The answer is harmony. Common knowledge is the only thing that allows us to cooperate on a massive scale. Think about something as simple as a red light. A red light only works because of common knowledge. I don't stop because I'm afraid of a car hitting me. I stop because I know that you know that I know the light is red. We have a mutual expectation of behavior. Without this public signal, civilization would literally crash at the first intersection. Pinker also explores the authority aspect. Why do we have ceremonies? Why do we have weddings, graduations, and presidential inaugurations? From a purely logical standpoint, a wedding is just a contract. You could sign it in a basement, but we spend thousands of dollars to stand in front of a crowd. Why? To create common knowledge. By saying "I do" in front of everyone, you're ensuring that everyone knows that everyone else knows you're married. It changes the social cost of breaking that vow. The crowd isn't just there to watch, they're there to witness, which is another word for becoming part of the common knowledge. But let's talk about the elephant in the room in our modern digital age. We are living in a time when the public and private spheres are blurring. In the past, you could have a private opinion that you only shared with close friends. Today, because of data tracking and digital footprints, everything we do has the potential to become common knowledge. Pinker warns that this creates a chilling effect. When we feel that Big Brother, or more accurately, the big mob, is always watching, we stop experimenting with ideas. We stop being honest. We fall into a state of preference falsification, where we say what we think people want to hear rather than what we actually believe. Before we move into the final segment, in which we'll discuss how to break the spell and Pinker's toolkit for reclaiming our intellectual honesty, let's do another quick check-in. If you're finding this deep dive into the matrix of social reality helpful, please share this episode with one friend, just one. By sharing it, you're creating a little pocket of common knowledge between you and them, a shared language to talk about the world.
We've talked about the traps, the mobs, and the secret language of bribes and first dates. But now we have to ask the most important question. How do we live in a world governed by these invisible loops of he knows that I know? How do we stop being puppets of common knowledge and start using it to our advantage?
Steven Pinker suggests that the first step is understanding the difference between privacy and secrecy. Secrecy is hiding a fact. Privacy is the ability to control what becomes common knowledge. In our digital age, we often confuse the two. When you send a private message, you aren't just keeping a secret, you are protecting a space where you can think and speak without the pressure of the global eye. Pinker argues that protecting these private spaces is essential for human creativity and mental health. If every thought is public, every thought becomes a performance. So, how do we break the spell of a false consensus? How do we stop that Abilene Paradox from ruining our meetings and our lives? The answer is surprisingly simple, yet incredibly difficult. Someone has to speak the truth out loud. There is a reason the story of the emperor's new clothes is a timeless classic. Everyone in the crowd saw that the emperor was naked. That was shared knowledge. But they all pretended he was wearing beautiful robes because they thought everyone else believed it. It only took one child, someone who didn't understand the rules of common knowledge, to shout, "He has no clothes on." The moment that child spoke, the shared knowledge became common knowledge. The illusion didn't just crack, it vanished. In your own life, whether it's in a toxic workplace or a social circle that has lost its way, being the child who points out the obvious is the most powerful act of rebellion. You aren't just giving people information, you are giving them permission to admit what they already know. But Pinker also gives us a warning about outrage. In the world of 2026, where cancel culture and academic shaming are part of the daily news cycle, we have to be careful not to become common knowledge junkies. We are biologically wired to pay attention to what the tribe thinks. Our brains get a hit of dopamine when we join a popular movement, and a hit of cortisol, the stress hormone, when we feel excluded. To survive this, Pinker suggests we practice cognitive decoupling. We need to learn to separate the signal from the noise. Just because a million people are outraged doesn't mean the outrage is justified. It just means the common knowledge machine is working. Before you join a mob or share a shaming post, ask yourself, am I doing this because I truly believe it, or am I doing it because I know that everyone else knows I'm supposed to? To wrap everything up, let's look at your common knowledge cheat sheet from Steven Pinker's work. First, understand that the veil matters. We use innuendo and polite hypocrisies not to be liars, but to protect our relationships. Don't always try to strip away the mask. Sometimes the mask is what allows us to coexist peacefully. Second, beware of the false consensus. If you are in a room where everyone is agreeing but something feels wrong, chances are other people feel it too. Be the one to ask the dumb question. You might just save everyone from driving to Abilene. Third, recognize the power of the public sphere. In 2026, your attention is the fuel for common knowledge. Choose what you witness carefully. When you engage with a shaming mob, you are helping to build a reality that might eventually come for you. And finally, remember that common knowledge is the foundation of cooperation. When we use it for good, for traffic lights, for democratic elections, for public celebrations, it is the most beautiful thing about being human. It is the harmony in the title of the book. Thank you so much for spending these 20 minutes with me. This book, When Everyone Knows That Everyone Knows, is a challenging read, but it provides a map for the invisible world we all inhabit. If you found this episode enlightening, please do me one last favor. Talk about it with someone today. Not just to share the information, but to create a new common knowledge between you and them. If you enjoyed this deep dive, check out our previous episodes on cognitive science and social psychology. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review. It helps us keep the thought police at bay and keeps the conversation going. Until next time, keep your eyes open, keep your thoughts your own, and remember, just because everyone is looking at the same thing doesn't mean they're seeing the truth. Stay curious.